Honey, I made us a nice dessert. Okay, so this is chocolate mousse that I secretly made last night while you were watching TV. I'm really excited. This looks good.
Yeah, the orange, I don't know if it's that you just grated it or it's really aromatic orange zest.
It's like hazelnut, orange, vanilla, chocolate. Goes so well together.
Yeah, I was going to say, because of the richness, it's a really small dessert serving size, but you'd be really happy eating just this much of it. And it's nice that you can you can sort of eat around the sea salt if you want to just have the chocolate hazelnut experience. I also could see like a little biscotti with it, or even a graham cracker, or just something that you
Crunchy.
could put in it, like a little cookie something you could put in it.
We've got a lot of it. We can't invite anybody over. We're just going to have to give it to the neighbors.
Yeah, deliver. It could be Valentine's Day delivery.
So Julia Child and Paul Child famously would make these elaborate handmade Valentine's Day cards.
I remember reading about those.
Yeah. So, as you may remember, I've had a tradition with you of making little Valentine's Day photo albums, and this is the first one I made for you. And I love it.
It's still in good shape
It's in good
after
shape.
all these years.
And it says, memories so far, ... on the cover. Which clearly I was banking on a long future together, but this was really born out of having absolutely no money, but knowing I was already falling in love with you.
From the year 2000.
Yeah, our first Valentine's Day.
Mousseline au chocolat, one of the most delicious desserts you can imagine. We're making it today on the French chef.
Hi, I'm Amy Traverso, food editor at Yankee Magazine and co-host of Weekends with Yankee. Welcome back to my kitchen for another episode of You and Julia at Home. Today I'm going to be making chocolate mousse to honor Valentine's Day. In many ways, this is a classic French recipe because it focuses on using technique and very few ingredients to achieve something wonderful. So I've got my 4 egg yolks in here, and then I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of sugar. Julia calls for superfine sugar, but that can be hard to find these days. So I'm using regular sugar, and I have found that it's just fine. So what we're going to do is beat these 2 ingredients together. I have this copper bowl, and truly it came because I was inspired by Julia. She always beat her eggs in these copper bowls. I feel a little closer to Julia when I use it. So the technique here is to beat them together until it forms what Julia calls a ribbon. And you will get an arm workout with this recipe. But you can see that already it's starting to thin out, and it's like the liquid from inside the egg yolks is being extracted by the sugar, and that is thinning the mixture as I beat it. When I lift up my whisk, the liquid sort of falls back on itself. It folds back on itself, and when I drip it across the surface, it sort of forms a ribbon that just sits on the top for a second. I'm just going to go for maybe 10 more seconds. Okay, so now that this is done, I'm going to add my liqueur. So this is a flavoring agent, and Julia used an orange liqueur like a Cointreau. This actually, I'm using Frangelico because I'm Italian and I like hazelnut and chocolate together. So I'm using hazelnut liqueur. You can use raspberry, you can use whatever flavor you like. You could do mint. The key is to just use a decent quality, good tasting liqueur.
And then we're going to put in 1/4 cup of orange liqueur. Now, if you're going to use any kind of liqueurs or rums in cooking, particularly desserts, use a very good quality of it. Because if they're bad, it's terrible. And so if you're going to use them, you have to spend the money. Otherwise, you can just use orange juice.
So I have a pot of barely simmering water. What I have is there's steam, but there's no bubbles really coming up. And that's the perfect temperature because obviously what you don't want to end up with are scrambled eggs.
Now these are going to be beaten over hot water until they become thick. This is rather like making a hollandaise sauce where you start out with egg yolks and beat them until they're warm.
Now, this is a really good arm workout, and I'm on the shorter side. Julia had the advantage of being more than 6 feet tall. Okay, I am gonna bring in my stool. I don't have Julia's natural advantage here. Okay, this is much more comfortable.
And as with egg yolks, you have to be careful that you don't heat them over direct flame, because then they might curdle into scrambled eggs.
Now, meanwhile, I have 6 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate. I just have chocolate chips, very simple, nothing fancy. And I have some coffee. This is 4 ounces of strong coffee, and I'm going to be melting the chocolate into the coffee. That gives you some nice layers of flavor. And I'm also going to add a little bit of vanilla. Now, Julia didn't add vanilla to her recipe, but I really like vanilla with chocolate, so I'm going to be adding that as well. So when Julia makes this recipe, she's doing her egg yolks at the same time as her chocolate. So I'm going to do that too. Just finish off the egg yolks. I've actually turned off the heat, but I'm just letting them cool down a little bit on the stove.
And when you're melting chocolate, you want to be very careful that you melt it just over water that's hot and not actually boiling. And once it starts melting like that, you can just take it off the water and just let it sit for a minute.
Okay, my chocolate's still melting, but this really is ready to cool down. And I have a bowl of ice over at the counter. So I'm gonna bring this over and just set it in the bowl of ice water to cool. And I'm gonna keep melting my chocolate. So as the chocolate melts into the coffee, it'll form a pretty loose mixture. It'll look like a very thin chocolate syrup. And that's okay, because you're going to be adding butter to it.
And particularly in a dessert like a mousse, it has to be very carefully melted so that it's a smooth and velvety consistency.
So this is when I'm going to start adding my butter. So I'm just going to spoon in kind of about a tablespoon at a time. I'll probably do 2 just to kind of speed things up. But you just want to work it in, let it melt, add a little more, and that will prevent it from forming a pool of butter at the top. Okay, the last of my butter is going to go in, and then we're ready to mix it all together. So my egg yolk mixture has been sitting on this ice bath. It's just sitting on a bowl of ice water, and it has cooled down beautifully. So now I can add my chocolate mixture, which is warm but not sort of searingly hot.
And you want to be sure when you're doing this part that you get all the pieces of butter and the chocolate intimately blended.
And here's where I just have one slight departure from Julia. I like a little more salt in my desserts than Julia did. So I'm just going to put a couple pinches of salt in here, because otherwise with the unsalted butter there's really no salt. And you need the contrast of a tiny bit of salt to really experience the sweetness and the richness of the chocolate. And now we're going to beat our egg whites. Very simple. Now Julia would have done this by hand in a copper bowl or with a handheld beater. However, I only have 1 copper bowl, so I've got to do this in my stand mixer. I've got the 4 egg whites that I have from when I separated the eggs out. It's one thing I love about this recipe is nothing is wasted. You're using the whole egg just separately. So I put my 4 egg yolks in there. So we're going to start out and just bring it to a very soft peak. And to that now I'm going to add a tablespoon of sugar. We're going to slowly, gradually incorporate the sugar into the mixture. Julia has a great illustration in Mastering the Art of French Cooking. Of course, I have my mom's copy right here. And she shows what it should look like. It's on page 159. In her illustration, she shows that when you remove the whisk from the egg whites, it should give you a little nice sort of peak at the top that bends but doesn't fall over. I'm not there yet, but I'm gonna just give it one more swirl and see. Actually, I am there. See how it's it's firm, it's not falling over, it's sort of bending over. So this looks good. Now all I have to do is fold the egg whites into my base, and then I have chocolate mousse. So the trick to folding is to just use a gentle motion where you're cutting in from the center and working out. So you're going down and up.
Hold your rubber spatula like that, and it's going to come down into the edge and up. And every time it does that, it brings a little bit of the bottom up over the egg whites. See, like that. Then keep turning your bowl.
Okay, now this has been worked in, so I'm ready to add the rest. The rest of it can all go in at once. It's starting to look more uniform. It's getting there. The key is to just lift up whatever's on the bottom, bring it up to the top. And I can smell the hazelnut. It smells really good. Okay, this is looking really good. I think I've hit the sweet spot between it being blended but not losing volume. So I'm going to stop right here and I'm going to pour this into some ramekins. I'm going to chill it for at least 2 hours up to overnight. You want to wrap it in plastic to keep it from drying out, and then we'll have our dessert. If you want to go for a more elegant look, maybe for Valentine's Day, something special, you could use some vintage barware. This is a vintage little coupe glass that I love with like a starburst pattern. Okay, so I'm going to put these in the refrigerator for at least 2 hours and up to overnight. So I hope this video will make you feel confident about trying chocolate mousse. That was really Julia's goal, to make French food feel accessible for American home cooks. But she wasn't just a by-the-book person. She said, remember that there's no end to imagination in the kitchen. And I like to live by that too. Well, we can edit out the moments where I need to just rest my arm for a second.